Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge, back once again with another episode of my ongoing weekly series, Valiant to the Last, in which I go through every single one of my Valiant Deluxe Edition hardcovers, one after another, and I read the entire Valiant universe of comics for the first time. And in this month's video, here we have it, Ninjak Deluxe Edition 1. So far we've read all of the Harbinger line of comics, which is quite complicated. We've read all of the Exo Manual line of comics, and we've read all of the Bloodshot line of comics. So now we're on Ninjak. Now, aren't many Ninjak Deluxe Editions, and this is the first one. So this is Ninjak Deluxe Edition 1. This is the series that came out in 2015. Let's have a look at it. So, it has the usual sort of banner top, edging, and then main image. Spine is consistent with the usual spines of this era, which is fine. And then the back, usual blurb, usual image. So Ninjak has already been introduced in quite a lot of the stuff that we've read so far. He's a member of Unity. He was actually introduced in the very first arc of Exo Manual. Standard inside flap there. And standard creative flap here. Yeah, so he was introduced then, and he's kind of, I mean, he is a ninja, but he's basically a British super spy. Imagine James Bond crossed with, I was going to say Wolverine, but that's not really accurate. James Bond crossed with Batman, I suppose, more than anything else. Let's have a look at the cover. We've got the logo Ninjak in purple. Purple is the colour scheme that goes with the ninja outfit that he wears. And we then have the spine, which is Valiant Ninjak Volume 1. Completely in keeping with all the other spines you've got from this era, so it look nice and clean on your shelf. And a nice, clean, simple bag. Like I said, purple end pages, so let's get into it. What does this collect? Well, this is book 1. And book 1 collects the following 3 arcs. It collects Weaponeer, Shadow Wars, and Operation Deadside. Weaponeer is issues 1 till 5, Shadow Wars issues 6 till 9, and Operation Deadside is issues 10 till 13. It's worth keeping in mind every single one of these single issues is kind of an anthology, in that it contains the main Ninjak issue, and then it contains a backup story which is much shorter, of several pages, but that then continues on into the next issue. So for example, issue 1 will have Story A, Story B. Issue 2 will have Story A, Story B. Again, they'll continue in that way. I would have expected that in a collected edition like this, it would have just collected all the Story A's together and all the Story B's together. But actually it hasn't done that. It's collected it issue by issue, so you're constantly bouncing between Story A and Story B in these anthologies. Which actually, when I read it, it does actually work, but it is an unusual mapping choice. This is the first arc, Weaponeer. Those are the covers as standard, and there we are, Ninjak issue 1. Turns out there was a Ninjak ongoing series back in the 90s when Valiant was first around, so I think it's taken a little while. It took 2 or 3 years after the Valiant relaunch for them to decide to do a Ninjak ongoing here. First thing I'll say, the first issue is about Ninjak, but it also immediately introduces a character called Roku. Oh my god, Roku is amazing. She's a fantastic antagonist. I love the look. The look reminds me a little bit of Suture from Todd McFarlane's Curse of the Spawn. But she's basically cooler than Ninjak in every conceivable way. She's awesome as an antagonist. And frankly, I was kind of gutted that there wasn't more of her in this volume. I am aware that there is later on a short limited series called Roku, so I very much hope we dive into that in a bit more detail. But anyway, this picks up with the introduction of Roku as a character, sets the scene for a lot of stuff to do with Colin King, or the person who actually is Ninjak. And then, like I say, it has some flashbacks here, so you can see this image here where it says "then" is a flashback of Colin King and his childhood and so on. His childhood, you know, he's a kid who grows up in a mansion getting raised by a butler. To some extent, is nominally similar to Batman, but actually it messes around with that trope hugely. It's actually like a really interesting kind of cool thing to do. As I said, we have an issue here, we have an A-side, and then we have what they call the Lost Files, which is the B story, which has got different artwork and is an entirely different story that happens. And then we move into issue 2. These issues are quite long, they're about 30 pages long each, give or take. I don't want to give many spoilers, so what I will say is the artwork is very good, the storyline is really interesting. The way the narrative keeps on interlacing the contemporary modern day narrative with the historic narrative of his childhood and his childhood experiences and what influences him, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's done well. The cover art is excellent, as you can see. It was a good, enjoyable read. The Weaponeer arc was definitely fun, and as I say, the character of Roku, as you can see here, absolutely awesome. I mean, I need to see more of this character. And it did occur to me randomly. I thought, imagine if an artist like Brett Booth, who did the last collected series of Bloodshot, had the opportunity to draw a character like Roku. That would have been absolutely amazing. But yeah, in terms of the first arc, I will say this is just good. It's worth reading. You don't need to know anything else about the Valiant universe to read this. You don't need to know about Exo Manowar, you don't need to know about Divinity or any of those sorts of things. It works fine in and of itself. This is a Roku Origin issue, which was pretty good. Right, so this is the thing that I want to complain about. Right, if we get in here, once we get into the sort of later issues, there's this character here who is the Undead Monk, which is a major character in Ninjak's origin, the mythology of the Ninjak kind of comics, various bits and pieces. Just to clarify, the Undead Monk is nothing at all to do with the Bleeding Monk from the Harbinger issues. However, the basic premise is so similar, it just seems really fucking stupid and unoriginal. So in Harbinger, if you read those comics, I hope you have, there's a character called the Bleeding Monk, who's immortal, who just lives in a monastery in Tibet or somewhere. And you know, a lot of the characters like hunt him out and try and track him down, try to learn from him, etc., etc. Well, it appears there's another one. This one's not bleeding. This one's just sitting there, but he's undead. He's immortal. He's been there forever. Doesn't move. Doesn't do anything. Garners all these disciples. Ends up with a monastery building up around him, etc., etc. And it's like, really, that was the best you could come up with. That's the best Matt Kindt could do. Like 2 years after the Bleeding Monk was introduced, to have the Undead Monk. It's not the same person, but they're really, really similar. Like, this is... It just seems just staggeringly unoriginal and stupid and a weird, confusing thing to have. The actual idea itself worked fine as an idea in terms of what they do with this undead monk figure. But the fact this undead monk exists in the wider Valiant universe where the Bleeding Monk exists, it's just... I know it sounds stupid, and it sounds like what I'm saying is stupid, but if you read the issues, and you read all the issues with the other monk from the Harbinger line of comics, this will just seem stupid. Anyway, back to the main story, of course. This is good. Decent artwork, as I said. Sort of interesting revelations about his background and his family. And that's the end of the first arc, which was Weaponeer. We then move smoothly into the Shadow Wars arc, which is a immediate sequel. The artwork does shift quite noticeably. You can see here, this is a definite change in artwork. Which I wasn't a massive fan of, but it works fine, to be totally honest. Also changes the composition and the framing and everything as well. Not to this better, as far as I'm concerned, but it's not a massive problem. I can happily deal with this. And again, we've got more stuff about this undead monk. This undead monk who isn't the Bleeding Monk. And it's like, what, they're friends, they're not friends, they both happen to live in Tibet or Himalaya. It's one of those... weird tropes where it's like you have this idea that, oh, if you go to a forbidden jungle somewhere, you'll be falling over one abandoned city after the next, after the next, after the next. It's like, yeah, it feels like in the Valiant universe, if you went to the Himalayas, every other mountain peak would have some mystical superpowered monk just sitting on there. It's like, it just feels stupid. Anyway, enough of that. Yeah, more issues. Artwork picks up again, gets sort of back to normal. Again, we're still having this alpha story and beta story with the Lost Files in every single issue. But I think the way that it's structured here works reasonably well. That's not to say it wouldn't have worked better had they just put all the A stories and all the B stories together, but conversation for another time. Anyway, so this is pretty cool. It continues. The story is decent. The closure at the end of the story isn't brilliant. But that said, there is a volume 2, and the issues continue, so I'm not going to get into a whole thing about it. And so it kind of ends here. I say that because it then moves into Operation Deadside, which is very much a self-contained Ninjak story. Two things you need to know about the story. You need to know Punk Mambo exists, which I'm aware of, that she exists, I know very little about her. And you need to be aware that Shadow Man and the Dead Side exist, which again, I'm aware of because I've read the other comics. But I haven't as yet read any of the Shadow Man series. So getting into Operation Deadside... yeah, here we are. There's Punk Mambo. This is Ninjak in his like super cool anti-Deadside armor. And then there's the various kind of shenanigans and hijinks where they travel to the Deadside, which is basically their version of the underworld. and then they have a conflict with, amongst other people, with Jack Boniface, this guy who was Shadow Man. I'll keep that short and sweet. It's quite a self-contained story, 4 issues long, well drawn, the writing's okay. Yeah, and then it kind of ends here, nice bit of closure, and that's the end of the volume. The gallery is the standard stuff one would expect. Extra features, DVD style commentaries, pencil sketches, some covers, some great artwork of Roku again there. And yeah, there we have it. There's some more Punk Mambo. Cool, that was Ninjak Deluxe Edition Volume 1. There is a Deluxe Edition Volume 2 which collects issues 14 onwards. And I do have that, and we will be reading that, but we won't be reading that next time. And the reason for that is that before I read that, I want to read a limited mini-series by Valiant called Rapture. And Rapture, as a mini-series, is a 4-issue mini-series set directly after Operation Deadside. It stars Ninjak and Shadow Man and so on and so forth, but it's set directly after Operation Deadside, and so as far as I can see, this is when I should read it. Having read this deluxe edition and finished Operation Deadside, I should read Rapture. I suspect, and I'm guessing here, I should read it before I read Deluxe Edition Volume 2. So I am going to do that. And if you're reading along with me and following along, then please do that. Please read the Rapture miniseries before you come back next week for our next video.
Alright, thanks for watching everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at @IamThomasJudge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.